everybody at Hacking Rio. It's a great pleasure to be with you today to talk about the future. To be sure, the present is quite a challenge, especially in Brazil, but there is a future worth looking at and worth being excited about. So let me try to be your guide for the future. Right? First, I think we need to stop asking the question about what will the future bring, as if the future was fixed or somebody else would dictate it for us or somebody else would invent it, right? The real question is, what kind of future do we want? I mean, if we look at technology, it's really quite clear that we can probably have any future we want in less than, say, 10, 15 years, because we are capable of reinventing so many things, right? Poverty, hunger, right? Even though, of course, those are social things as well. But technology has the solutions for the environment, for food, for water. We just have to have the will to execute on those possibilities. The real question is not going to be what kind of future will happen to us or what's going to happen, but what do we want and how do we go about formulating what we want? It's quite clear that we're living in a totally connected society, and whatever happens in Brazil impacts all other countries. What happens to the Amazon impacts everybody, even though some people may think different. But we are in a totally connected world, and it's quite clear what's happening here. You know, we are heading towards one of those crises that is totally unprecedented. I mean, we're talking about a global macroeconomic change that at this point says total and utter uncertainty. And we have to be ready for this. We have to think agile. We have to be able to reinvent. We have to have a lot of imagination. Right? We have to keep thinking positive, because this crisis will not be over anytime soon. It will continue to drag on. We're going to have to figure out what we do with this in the long run. And I sometimes call this the Corona coaster. Great article in The Economist the other day about what's happening here. It's like we're riding up and down this emotional situation. Sometimes we think it won't be as bad. Sometimes we think it's really bad. And, you know, it's going up and down like a roller coaster. Really what we have to do here is we have to help each other. We have to support each other. We have to think beyond the obvious, and we have to have a perspective for the future. Whether you're a hacker or a technologist, or whether you're a business person or a government employee, you have to be able to imagine what comes in the near future and how do we take advantage of it. I mean, think about this one thing, for example, on the Corona coaster. Education in schools. I mean, if the schools are going to stay closed, and this is a worldwide debate, there's only a couple of countries where the schools are entirely open, right? What are we going to do with everybody to study from home? Will an 8-year-old kid study from home when they don't even have internet? How does that work? We're going to have to really figure out what to do about this. This is a very, very high priority, I think, in all countries, but especially in Brazil. Yeah? How do we bridge the digital divide? You know, how is the government going to support remote learning and working from home and staying at home? And this is a very, very big thing that's going to basically stretch out into the future for an unknown time. Hopefully there'll be a vaccine and we can resume normality to some degree, but this is one of those big challenges. And yes, looking at some businesses like cruise ships, I don't know if you ever thought that cruise ships were necessary or a good thing, but some things will end. This is one of the things that will probably just end or be meaningless or be very small in the future. Will that happen to everything? I don't think so. I think we're going to keep going to work. We're going to keep on having workplaces to go to. We're going to keep on traveling, but in different ways. Substantial change, but some things will end as a result of this crisis. And one of them is that governments that don't figure out how to support the citizens during these difficult times will end. And we see that playing out all over the world. The really smart governments all over the world, right? Of course, they are women, right? Led by women. New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, Taiwan, Denmark, Iceland. That's a very big challenge for Brazil. Let's think about that while we continue with the presentation. I think we're sometimes staring down this really dark corridor here. And this goes for myself too. My work has changed entirely. I'm in here now, not up there. And that is really quite a different cup of tea. And we all have to change and adapt. But I still think that the future is better than we think. Right? The future is a different place that we have to get used to. And we have to figure out how we're going to move into the future so that we can see the bright spot at the end of this dark hallway. There's many good things that will come out of this crisis. Just like every crisis is something that we shouldn't waste, right? Milton Friedman once said, only a crisis, real or imagined, brings real change. And we are at the point of the crisis hitting us so that we have to transform, we have to be different, we have to do something entirely different. Sometimes we just have to be optimistic, or we have to improvise, right? What's it called? Genio, right? We have to make stuff up, right? I mean, this is a great example how we can improvise, of course, slightly on the humorous side, I hope. But so if we're looking in this direction, it's really quite clear. What we're seeing here is what I call the Great Transformation. The World Economic Forum calls this the Great Reset. I think that's pretty much the same thing, but this transformation means that things that used to be on the top, right? You can see here, the cruise ship and oil and gas and traveling and banking, right? It's all being reshuffled and falling to the bottom. And now the new stuff on top is, of course, healthcare, the pandemic. How can we respond? How can we have a vaccine? And of course, energy, climate change has moved to the top of the agenda as well. And working from home, right? And generally technology. I mean, the winners are clearly technology, healthcare, government, right? Clearly, that is a great transformation that is going to allow us to reset, right? To change the narrative, to think about different things that weren't possible before. I mean, would you have imagined that the government would tell you that you have to stay at home? Right? This is unheard of. And now we're saying, yeah, well, if it's necessary, we'll do that. So in my view, there's a couple of things that we need to do right now to bring that point home. Of course, focus on survival. Right? Make sure that things are working. The money is flowing in some direction, in some way that will ensure your survival for the next 2 years or so. This survival is critical, of course. Collaboration, working together to find new solutions, adaptation to the situation. This isn't going to stop and go back to normal. Don't pretend for a second that we're going to go back to the same place, and hopefully the same place wasn't good anyway. But we have to adapt to this, and finally we have to transform. Right? We have to think of a new way that we're going to approach things in a new way beyond what we had yesterday. Transformation of everything, of industry, of economics, and this is kind of a reset button, a giant reset button that you can push. Right? So clearly in this world, that is going from lock-up to freeing up to lockdown again to all kinds of measures to help our survival and to help us deal with this crisis. And there is no such thing as going back to normal. This just isn't. We're not going back to what it was before. This is like saying, let's go, 1950 to go back to 1930, before the war. And normal and before the pandemic wasn't good anyway. There were many things that weren't going wrong. And the interesting thing about this crisis is that it brings out the best in us, solidarity, collaboration, helping each other, and it also brings out the worst in us. Like we can use this pandemic to figure out how to do complete surveillance for all citizens, and use technology to basically make everybody omni-filtered and looked at and observed like a panopticon. Right? So we have to think about what is going to be the reset. What else can we do? And it's really quite clear. One of the things that was normal was inequality, and especially in Brazil, of course, this is a huge issue, as it is in America and the UK and South Africa and many other places, of course. And now it turns out the higher the inequality in any given country or nation or region, right, the higher the number of infections and deaths by this pandemic and others that will follow. Inequality translates directly into inability to deal with critical emergency situations. Look at the US numbers. The number of inequality. I think the Brazil number is actually much higher than this. So inequality is a major driver of this. And if you're looking at another stat here, the probability of losing a job because of this crisis, where is it the biggest? Of course, in America, is black and brown people, not white people. Right? It is the minorities. And around the world, and I think these are American numbers, right, is the people that don't make much money that are going to be hit the hardest. And we really have to pay attention to this. Inequality is a major driver behind all these issues, and it magnifies the things about COVID. And that's a huge political discussion about how we can change inequality. especially in Brazil. It's been a long time topic with about, 35 million people considered to be under the total level of poverty in Brazil. So that's a major drive that we have to think about, and I think we're going to see countries that are completely on the wrong path here and have a dysfunctional society, dysfunctional response like the US to this crisis, right? They're going to be rebooted. And I'm hoping for a new American renaissance, and I think we can see that coming up, with the elections, hopefully, and after the elections, a whole new rebooting and a whole new importance of the United States will come up. And clearly, if there's one country that has to pivot because of inequality and climate change and capitalism, it'll be the US. And that's something that I think Brazil can learn. It's time to pivot. It's time to turn around into a new direction that creates a society that can actually be agile and resilient. Here on this chart, you can see clearly what's happening in our immediate future. And I think if you're in technology, if you're a hacker, right, this is fantastic, right? Because this future is big tech, big media, big state, big question, right? Big health, of course, big healthcare, biotechnology, and big green. And, you can also say, of course, it's big debt, right? Government is going to spend a lot of money that they have to get back somehow. That's another big discussion. But amazing opportunity that the tech companies have rallied, their stock has rallied, and technology has become even more central. I mean, we're doing this right here with technology, right? We are using technology every day, even more so than before. So that is going to be a giant job creator, I think. But let's make no mistake about it. There's a few other points which I want to get into. There's 4 challenges here. Right? 2 of them are already discussed, which of course is the pandemic and inequality. But here's the third one: capitalism. Right? Do we really want to have a system where the better off are going to be even better off, and they're not even touched by the COVID crisis, right? Or do we want a more collective society, a sort of sustainable capitalism, as Al Gore has put it, or Paul Mason has said, a post-capitalism society? And well, of course, very big discussion. Again, especially US and Brazil, there's lots of parallels here. And we have in Europe, we have our discussion about what we call social capitalism. Right? That leads to the final point. The really big thing in the room is climate change. Right? We're going to have to adopt to climate change. We're going to have to adapt measures and mitigate and do all these things that we have on the agenda for a long time. But here's the point, right? COVID-19 is a test run for climate change, for the changes that we have to make, for the things that we don't like doing, but we have to do them, for the mental mindset that we had to jump into a new world. I mean, this is going to be right now in the next few years. That is the primary discussion. And I think on the positive side, it will create a huge amount of work and jobs right here. If we funnel money into the right direction, I think you're going to see in the very near future money moving out of oil and gas and the military, right? Moving towards social, healthcare, and of course, environment, new energy. And that is something that we're learning right now. This is what we need. This is not a question of saying that, this is an optional thing. I mean, the earth isn't optional. So this is something I think that we have to become very good at pivoting, turning the ship around, because this is what's happening all around us. We have to reinvent. Reinvent tourism, reinvent airline travel, reinvent events and conferences, reinvent how we do business, working from home. This is a fantastic opportunity forcing us to reinvent. I mean, who would voluntarily reinvent when things look like they're cruising along okay? We're not. Right? I mean, in 2019, I traveled some 300 flights around the world. And here I am at home. No more flying. Right? I have to pivot. All of us have to pivot. I'm going to give you some examples of what pivoting really is. Right? I mean, this is, I think, a significant challenge for all of us, is to figure out what is your pivot. I mean, if you have tourism, it's going to be local tourism. Not so much international, right? Maybe later again, maybe in a different way, sustainable tourism. This is, of course, a very big question for Rio. How do you attract tourism of that nature? But here's a couple examples. Now, people are now doing concerts in drive-in theaters to keep the social distancing. Yeah, it's probably not the same, I can imagine, but people are being inventive. Very popular in Denmark. Now the first airline seats in economy that allows social distancing, a company called Zephyr, that allows you to sleep in a sort of stacked situation that's supposed to be safer. The Tour de France went virtual. It was a great success. I watched some of it. It was pretty amazing, including the participants participating on virtual bikes. Not just a virtual 3D thing, but felt very real. And companies are now pivoting to make equipment to deal with the COVID pandemic, including here the ventilators made by a Portuguese company, 3D printed ventilators. Right? I mean, reinventing, right? Big malls are starting to do movie theater drive-ins. Now, this is like 30 years ago when drive-ins were, basically the malls are going to change because, retail will be heavily suffering from this. And we have to be inventive. We have to think of new things. Right? And, finally, of course, I'm pivoting to you, thankfully without the mask here, but being virtually there. Let me talk about work and jobs. Many people are worried about the future of work.